My name is Harper Lane. I'm 34 years old, and this morning, I buried my only child while my family toasted champagne across town. Mason's casket was so small it looked wrong against the open earth. White lilies trembling in the wind. I kept waiting for my parents, for my sister Sloane, for anyone, but the only sound was the dirt hitting wood. My phone buzzed with their party posts, smiles framed by chandeliers. They forgot my son. They forgot me. I thought grief would kill me, but what they didn't know was that something far colder had just been born inside me. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. Sometimes the people closest to you don't need knives. They just need silence and timing. Stay with me, because this story isn't about grief. It's about what happens when grief learns how to fight back. I grew up in a house where silence was a currency. The louder you cried, the less you got. My parents, Gregory and Diane Carter, believed good manners could hide any rot. Our dinner table was polished oak, long enough to seat 8, though there were only 4 of us. My sister, Sloane, always sat closest to the head, the spot with the best light for family photos. I remember one Thanksgiving, when I was 9. I'd spent the whole morning peeling potatoes while Sloane watched cartoons. When the turkey came out golden and crisp, Dad carved the first piece and handed it straight to her. "For our little star," he said, smiling for the camcorder. I waited for my turn, but the plate kept circling past me. Mom didn't even notice. The camera caught my smile, anyway, tight, trained, the kind that doesn't reach your eyes. That was the first lesson. Love in our family wasn't earned by effort. It was assigned by order of birth. Sloane was 3 years older, smarter, prettier, and according to Mom, the one who'll go places. I was the one who meant well. I didn't know it then, but that small injustice would echo for decades. When Sloane got accepted into a private high school, they celebrated with a weekend trip to Aspen. I got a used backpack and a pat on the shoulder. Later that year, I won a regional writing contest, first place out of 400 students. Dad looked up from his paper and said, "That's nice, Harper, but don't get carried away. Words don't pay bills." By the time we reached adulthood, Sloane was the family's investment. I was the safety net. She studied communications at NYU. I took night classes while working retail to cover my tuition. Every call from home began with Mom asking about Sloane's internships. Then, "And you, Harper? Still at that store?" But life has a way of humbling even the chosen ones. When I met Jason Lane, I didn't care that he drove a dented Honda or wore thrift store suits. He listened, really listened. On our third date, he said, "You look like someone who cares too much for other people." I wanted to believe he saw me, not the shadow of my sister, not the afterthought of my parents. We married quietly. No ballroom, no chandeliers. My parents didn't come. "It's too last minute," Mom said, though Sloane's weekend in Cabo was somehow sacred. Jason's parents, Robert and Martha, made up for it, warm, genuine people who hugged first and asked questions later. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. When Mason was born 2 years later, I thought maybe the curse had lifted. He had Jason's steady brown eyes and my restless curiosity. Even my parents softened a little, sending a silver rattle engraved with his initials. "A future heirloom," Mom wrote in the card. I didn't realize how prophetic that word would become. The first signs came when Mason was 7. Bruises that didn't fade. Nosebleeds that soaked through tissues faster than I could replace them. His pediatrician ordered blood work, and within days, our world shrank to the size of hospital corridors and waiting rooms that smelled of disinfectant and despair. I can still see the moment Dr. Priya Shah entered with the results, her face calm, but her knuckles white around the folder. "Harper," she said gently, "Mason's tests show a rare form of aplastic anemia. His bone marrow isn't producing enough cells." Jason's hand found mine. My ears rang so loudly, I barely heard the rest. Transfusions, medications, possible transplant, survival rates. I nodded like I understood, but my world was disintegrating in slow motion. Jason took a leave from work, but 6 months later, his company transferred him overseas to oversee a merger. "Just for a few months," he promised. "I'll fly back for every treatment I can." Before leaving, he met with a lawyer, Samuel Whitaker, to set up a trust for Mason's future education and medical care. "If anything ever happens," Jason said, "I want you to be protected." Those words would come back to haunt us both. During the next year, I learned the geography of Street Augustine Children's Hospital by heart: the humming vending machines, the flicker of broken fluorescent lights, the coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. Evelyn Brooks, my neighbor, would drop off homemade soup at my doorstep with little notes. Rest, dear. You can't pour from an empty cup. I tried to believe her, but rest was a luxury. Every beep from the hospital monitors felt like a countdown. I kept Mason company through the nights, telling him stories about superheroes who fought invisible monsters. "I'm not scared," he'd whisper, "because you're my sidekick." Some nights I'd watch him sleep, his skin pale under the IV glow, and wonder if faith was just another word for denial. I prayed anyway. The last autumn we had together, he asked to go outside. We walked under the red maples in the hospital courtyard, his IV pole creaking along beside us. "Do you think the leaves hurt when they fall?" he asked. "Maybe," I said, "but they make everything beautiful before they go." He smiled, small and wise. "Then I'll do that too." I didn't know it then, but he meant it. When the treatment stopped working, Dr. Shaw looked at me with tears she couldn't hide. "You've done everything," she said softly. "It's time to let him rest." Jason flew back for the final week. We sat together by Mason's bed as he drifted between dreams, his favorite superhero pajamas worn thin from too many washes. On his last night, he squeezed my hand and whispered, "Promise me, Mom, you'll still fight bad guys when I can't." I promised. The next morning, the monitors went silent. No scream came out of me, just a soundless collapse. I thought the world would end there, in that sterile room. But instead, life kept going, cruelly normal. People sent flowers, casseroles, thoughts, and prayers. My family sent nothing, not even a call. At the funeral, the minister's words blurred into static. And when I lowered Mason's action figure onto his casket, I felt something harden in my chest, a vow forged in the ashes of motherhood. I didn't know it back then, but the real battle hadn't even begun. After the funeral, days blurred together like a film that wouldn't stop looping the same awful scene. The house was too quiet, every corner echoing Mason's laughter. His cereal bowl still sat in the sink. His shoes, one untied, waited by the door. I couldn't bring myself to move anything. Grief made me superstitious, as if leaving things untouched could make time rewind. Then came the call from my mother. Her voice was brittle, like porcelain ready to crack. "Harper, dear, we should meet. There are financial matters to settle regarding Mason's trust." She said his name like a business transaction. The next day, I drove to my parents' estate in Oak Hollow, a neighborhood so manicured it didn't seem capable of tragedy. Their silver BMW gleamed in the driveway, and beside it a luxury SUV with a custom license plate. Sloan one. My stomach nodded. The moment I walked in, I knew it wasn't a family meeting. It was an ambush. Sloan sat on the cream sofa, legs crossed neatly, scrolling her phone. Mom stood by the mantel, framed by wedding photos of Sloan and Trevor's engagement shoot. Dad was at the coffee table, flipping through a thick folder. "Sit, Harper," he said, like I was an employee late to a meeting. I stayed standing. "What's this about?" Mom smiled tightly. "Sweetheart, we're worried about you. After everything, you shouldn't have to handle complicated legal matters alone." Sloan looked up from her phone. "You've been through a lot, and with your history of impulsive decisions." "What history?" I cut in. She smirked. "Remember the boutique idea after college? You wanted to borrow from Dad's retirement to open it. That was 10 years ago." I snapped. Dad slid a pen across the table toward me. "Let's stay focused. Jason's trust fund for Mason needs a responsible trustee. We think it's best if Sloan handles it temporarily. Just sign here." The papers gleamed under the chandelier. I didn't touch them. "Temporarily? You mean permanently?" Mom's voice softened, rehearsed sympathy dripping from every word. "It's not about taking anything from you. It's about protecting you, Harper. You're grieving. You're not thinking clearly." I felt my pulse in my throat. "You didn't even come to the funeral." Sloan sighed. "We were at the Grand Horizon, remember? 200 guests. Non-refundable deposits. You know how these things work." "You mean your engagement party?" "Life doesn't stop for one tragedy," she said coolly. "We all mourn in our own ways." I looked at Dad. "You agree with this?" He didn't flinch. "We spoke to Jason's lawyer already. He understands this is the prudent choice. That's when I saw it, a page buried in the folder. Dated 14 months earlier, legal research about beneficiary transfers and guardianship petitions. They had planned this while Mason was still alive. You were preparing for this, I said, my voice shaking. Before he even died. Mom's eyes flickered. Now don't be dramatic. I grabbed the papers and walked out. Sloane called after me. You'll regret this. I didn't look back. That night, Evelyn found me on my porch, shaking. She didn't ask questions, just set a thermos of soup beside me and sat in silence until I could speak. When I told her what happened, she pressed her hand over mine. You can't fight them alone, she said. But you don't have to. 2 days later, I called Jason's attorney, Samuel Whitaker. His voice was steady, his tone clipped but kind. I remember the case, he said. Jason was meticulous. He left instructions you should see. I met him at his downtown office, a place that smelled of leather and old law books. Sam spread Jason's file across the desk. At the top was a notarized statement. Jason's handwriting unmistakable. If Mason's care is no longer required, the residual beneficiary is Harper Lane. No third party may amend or claim oversight. This trust is to secure her future and honor the love she gave our son. Tears stung my eyes. Jason had seen what I couldn't bear to imagine. Sam looked up. Your family has no legal standing, but they may try to challenge your competency. I exhaled slowly. They already are. He nodded. Then we prepare. That night, I turned my house into a fortress of truth. I organized Mason's hospital records, receipts, bills, my journal from every appointment. Evelyn helped me compile everything. If they call you unstable, she said, we'll show them what strength looks like. But Sloane didn't play fair. Within a week, I started getting anonymous emails, concerned citizens urging me to seek therapy, articles about grief psychosis. Someone leaked parts of Mason's medical history online, twisting it into proof I'd mismanaged his care. Then one evening, my doorbell rang. Through the camera feed, I saw her, Sloane, alone, holding a bottle of wine like a peace offering. I didn't open the door. Harper, she called softly, her voice muffled by the rain. Let me in. I don't want this to get uglier than it has to. Her tone was gentle, but her eyes, even through the camera, were sharp. Go home, Sloane. Please. I can make this all go away. Just sign over the trust. You'll still get an allowance, I promise. I almost laughed. An allowance? For my son's legacy? Her expression hardened. If you keep fighting, you'll lose everything. We'll destroy you in court. Everyone already thinks you're unhinged. Why prove them, right? I let the camera record every word. When she finally walked away, I sank onto the floor, shaking not from fear, but from something else. Resolve. The next morning, I sent the video to Sam. His reply came within minutes. Perfect. That's your weapon. We spent the next few weeks building a wall of evidence, witness statements, medical logs, character letters from Dr. Shah and the hospital staff. Jason's parents volunteered to testify. Evelyn documented everything she'd seen. Every hospital visit. Every night she stayed with Mason when I was too exhausted to drive home. For the first time in months, I felt something that wasn't grief. It was focus. Still, I knew my family. They wouldn't back down quietly. And they didn't. A sheriff's knock came one gray morning, thick envelope in hand. You've been served, he said. Inside was a petition for emergency guardianship over me, citing mental instability due to prolonged bereavement. Attached were 3 affidavits, including one from Nicole Perez, my best friend. Her words stabbed deeper than any knife. Harper has shown erratic behavior during her son's illness. She has frequent emotional breakdowns and irrational outbursts. I sat on the floor, reading it over and over, until Evelyn found me there. They've turned her against me, I whispered. Evelyn knelt beside me. Then we turned the truth against them. That night, I opened the camera feed again, watching Sloane's face frozen mid-threat. Every cruel word, every smirk captured in perfect clarity. And for the first time since Mason's last breath, I smiled. Cold, steady. They thought they were burying me under paperwork and lies. But what they'd really done was hand me proof. Proof I could use to burn down their perfect facade piece by piece. The first court date was set before I even had time to breathe. The summons said emergency petition for guardianship, but what it really meant was a public execution of my credibility. Sloane's PR machine worked faster than any legal one. Within days, local blogs ran headlines, "Family seeks help for grieving mother." My name became clickbait for their sympathy campaign. They'd stolen my story before the judge even heard it. At the grocery store, a woman I barely knew placed a hand on my arm. "We're all praying for you, sweetheart," she said softly, as if I were terminal. I smiled mechanically and left my card in the aisle. By the time I reached the car, my hands were shaking so hard, I dropped the keys twice. That night, Sam called. "They're controlling the narrative. We need to fight back with documentation, not emotion." "I have documentation," I said. "Hospital logs, receipts, security footage. Even Sloane's doorstep confession." "Good," he replied. "Then we build the wall higher." We turned my dining room into what Sam called the war room. Stacks of binders lined the table, color-coded and labeled medical care, financials, witness statements, media manipulation. Evelyn helped organize while I typed late into the night, fueled by cold coffee and rage. But the war escalated faster than I expected. Nicole stopped answering my calls. When she finally did, her voice was a whisper. "I'm sorry, Harper. I didn't have a choice. Sloane, she has a video of me. A DUI from 2 years ago. If I didn't sign the affidavit, she said she'd leak it to my employer." My throat went dry. "You could have told me. I thought I could fix it before it reached court. Please don't hate me." I didn't respond. The line went silent. Then she hung up. Another betrayal. Another scar. A week later, the media pressure turned surgical. Sloane posted a polished video on her social platforms, soft lighting, piano music, the perfect blend of sorrow and self-promotion. "My sister Harper is struggling," she said tearfully. "This isn't about money. It's about protecting her and honoring Mason's memory responsibly." I watched it twice. No cracks, no hesitation. If I didn't know better, I might have believed her. The comments were worse. "She looks unwell. Poor woman. Grief does strange things. Her sister's a saint for stepping in." I threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall, leaving a dent but no relief. Sam arrived the next morning with new evidence. "Karen Whitmore from Street. Augustine sent this," he said, handing me a printout. "Access logs. Someone used a deactivated volunteer account to download Mason's medical records. The username was familiar. nperez03. Nicole's old volunteer ID." I felt my stomach drop. Sloane used her account. Sam nodded. "We'll subpoena the hospital's internal camera footage. If we can tie this to Sloane, it's not just unethical, it's criminal." That night, I barely slept. Each creak of the house felt like a ghost of Mason's laughter, reminding me why I couldn't afford to collapse. Around midnight, my phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Sign the papers and walk away." No signature. But I didn't need one. I could hear Sloane's tone between the letters. The next morning, I woke to the sound of gravel crunching outside. A car I didn't recognize idled in my driveway. I peeked through the blinds and saw a man with a telephoto lens aiming it straight at my window. I stepped outside, heart pounding. "Can I help you?" He lowered the camera, smirking. "Freelancer. Covering the guardianship case. People love redemption arcs." I walked right up to the lens. "Then make sure you get my good side," I said coldly. "Because when this is over, you'll be photographing apologies." He didn't come back. Sam called again that afternoon. "You're on their radar. They're building an insanity narrative, calling former coworkers, asking about your emotional stability." "I don't care what they say," I replied. "I have the truth." "Truth isn't enough," he said quietly. "You need witnesses who'll stand by you." Evelyn volunteered first. "I've kept journals," she told me. "Every visit, every meal I brought. I'll testify to what I saw." Then Dr. Shaw agreed. "You were the most attentive parent I've ever met," she said. "If they question that, I'll answer under oath." Piece by piece, my circle of silence turned into a fortress. Still, I knew Sloane wouldn't stop. The night before the hearing, a letter slid under my door typed, unsigned, smelling faintly of perfume. "You think you can win because of your dead son. But you forget we own the narrative." I folded it neatly and added it to my evidence pile. They wanted to break me, but they'd forgotten one thing. I'd already been broken. And when you've lost everything, the only thing left to fear is what happens when you start fighting back. The morning of the first hearing was gray, almost metallic sky, like cold steel. The kind that presses down on you. I stood outside the courthouse clutching Mason's silver pendant. The wind smelled like rain and exhaust. Reporters waited by the steps, microphones raised like bayonets. I could already hear Sloane's voice inside, laughing with the same smooth confidence she'd always had. When she spotted me, her smile froze, then sharpened. "You look tired," she said softly, brushing imaginary dust off her blazer. "Maybe this is for the best." I didn't answer. I just walked past her. Inside the courtroom, everything was staged to perfection, the Carter family sitting together, like a magazine spread. Mom wore pearls. Dad adjusted his tie. Sloane crossed her legs, elegant as ever. I sat alone. No attorney could hide the imbalance of optics. Judge Meredith Cole, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and an expression carved from stone, opened the session. "We are here to determine whether Miss Harper Lane is fit to serve as trustee and beneficiary of the Mason Lane Trust." My heart thudded once, hard. Their lawyer, a man with a voice like polished glass, began his attack. "Your Honor, the respondents only wish to ensure Miss Lane's emotional well-being. She's suffered immense trauma and is currently unable to manage complex assets. We have testimony from close acquaintances attesting to her instability." He turned, gesturing toward the back. Nicole. She looked smaller than I remembered, eyes darting anywhere but mine. When asked to confirm her affidavit, she hesitated, then whispered, "Yes." My stomach turned. Sam leaned toward me. "Don't react," he murmured. "Let her hang herself." I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles whitened. Then came Sloane's performance practiced. Trembling voice, tears glistening like props. "I love my sister," she said, looking straight at me. "But grief changes people. Harper's not herself. I'm only trying to protect her from making irreversible mistakes." For a second, the courtroom believed her. I could feel it. The pitying looks, the murmurs. Then Sam stood. "Your Honor, we have evidence suggesting this petition was prepared before Mason's passing 14 months prior. In fact, we'd like to submit Exhibit C." Gasps rippled through the room. Sloane's lawyer objected, but Judge Cole waved him off. "Overruled. Proceed." Sam projected the timeline onto a screen. Email threads, drafts, and a memo referencing anticipated transfer once estate finalizes. The dates didn't lie. Sloane's mask didn't crack, but her fingers tapped nervously against her chair. When court adjourned for the day, she brushed past me in the hallway. "You think this proves anything?" she hissed. "You're one nervous breakdown away from losing it all." I smiled. "Then maybe you should stop pushing." Outside, the sky finally opened, sheets of rain hammering the concrete. I stood there until I was soaked, until the cold reminded me I was still alive. That night, Sam came by with new developments. "Officer Miles Grant from hospital security wants to meet. Says he found something on the footage." We met him in a dim parking lot behind Street Augustine. He handed over a USB drive. This was from 3 weeks before the breach was reported. Someone logged in after hours from a visitor terminal, a woman wearing a badge that didn't match her face. He paused. Security camera caught the reflection in the screen. We watched it in Sam's office. The grainy footage showed Sloane's profile, perfect makeup, a fake smile, a stolen login tag. Perez03. It was her. Clear as day. Sam exhaled. "This is felony-level privacy violation. We sit on it until the hearing, then detonate." In the following days, the tension coiled tighter. Rumors spread that I'd forged evidence, that Jason's video was edited. Journalists camped outside my driveway. I stopped answering the door. Then Nicole showed up. She stood there, soaked in rain, shaking. She said she'd ruined me. She confessed. "But I can't do this anymore. I'll testify. I'll tell the judge everything." I let her in. She cried until her voice cracked. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger, just pity. "You're not saving me," I said quietly. "You're saving yourself." "I know," she whispered. "But maybe that's where it starts." The day she flipped her statement, Sloane's camp went silent. No posts, no leaks, just quiet, the kind that always comes before something breaks. That night, I sat alone at the dining table, our war room. Every binder, every photo, every receipt told a story of how far they were willing to go and how much further I was willing to go to stop them. I picked up Mason's pendant, feeling its weight press against my palm. You told me to fight the bad guys, I whispered. I'm ready. The next morning, Sam texted one line. Tomorrow final hearing. Bring everything. I looked at the mirror. For the first time since the funeral, I saw no grief left, only clarity. They wanted to prove I was unfit. They were about to find out how dangerous a calm woman can be when she finally stops apologizing. The final hearing fell on a morning so still it felt staged. No wind, no birds, just the hollow echo of my heels across the courthouse marble. I wore Mason's silver pendant beneath a crisp white blouse, the same pendant I'd touched every night before sleep since the funeral. Today, it felt like armor. Inside, the room was crowded. Reporters lined the back wall. Even Judge Cole looked sterner than before, aware this case had become a public spectacle. Sloane sat flanked by our parents, her posture immaculate, her lipstick unflinching red. When I took my seat beside Sam, she smiled a predator's smile as if she'd already won. Judge Cole adjusted her glasses. Court will hear final arguments in the matter of the Carter petition versus Harper Lane. Their lawyer stood first, his tone smooth as silk. Your Honor, my clients are here out of love, not greed. Miss Lane's emotional instability has been well documented. She isolated herself during her son's illness, refused professional help, and made questionable medical decisions. He gestured toward a screen. We have testimonies from close acquaintances confirming erratic behavior. Nicole's video deposition flickered on screen, her earlier affidavit, the false one. My stomach clenched, but I didn't look away. He continued, this isn't about punishment, it's protection. We simply ask the court to grant guardianship to Miss Sloane Carter, who can ensure that Mason's trust is handled responsibly. Sloane dabbed her eyes with a tissue she didn't need. When he finished, the silence was deafening. Then Sam rose. Your Honor, he began, voice steady. My client is not the unstable party here. She is the only person in this room who stood beside her dying child for 18 straight months, while every petitioner here was too busy attending galas and planning beach houses. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Sam's tone sharpened. We will demonstrate that this so-called guardianship was planned long before Mason passed. Exhibit 1. Internal Carter family emails dated 14 months ago, discussing how to reallocate funds if the worst happens. Gasps. The judge's expression hardened. He continued, Exhibit 2. Hospital security logs from Street Augustine Children's, provided by Officer Miles Grant and verified by IT. Exhibit 3. Security footage confirming that Miss Sloane Carter accessed confidential medical files using a stolen volunteer ID. The video began to play grainy, time-stamped. Sloane's face glowed on screen, reflected in the monitor as she leaned toward the terminal, typing. The badge on her lapel read in Perez 03. Her attorney leapt up. Objection. Inadmissible. Overruled. Judge Cole said sharply. Sloane's hand tightened on her chair, her knuckles white. Sam turned back to the judge. Exhibit 4. Recorded audio from October 12th. Miss Carter visiting Miss Lane's home. My voice echoed through the speakers. You think you deserve that money? You were always the burden. Sloane's own voice followed. Dripping venom. Sign the trust, or we'll destroy your reputation completely. The room froze. Even my mother's face blanched. My father lowered his gaze. Judge Cole's pen tapped once, twice, against her notebook. Sam wasn't finished. Exhibit 5. Video recorded at Riverside Coffee, where the Carters discussed how to use Mason's trust to settle Miss Carter's fiancé's debt and fund an Aspen property. The screen lit again, clear audio. Perfect timing. Mom's voice. Once we secure guardianship, we can settle the mortgage situation. Dad. And that beach house contractor wants his payment. Sloane. I just need this done before Trevor's next project deadline. Gasps spread like wildfire. Cameras clicked. Sloane's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitch. Sam turned off the screen. This is not love, Your Honor. This is larceny wrapped in sympathy. The judge's eyes swept the room. Do the petitioners wish to respond? Sloane started to speak, but her mother's trembling hand stopped her. Before anyone could recover, the back doors opened. Nicole entered, head high, escorted by a bailiff. Your Honor, she said, voice shaking but clear. I need to amend my testimony. The courtroom erupted. Judge Cole banged her gavel. Order. Nicole continued, tears in her eyes. I lied in my affidavit. Sloane blackmailed me with an old DUI video. She made me say Harper was unstable. But Harper, she was the strongest person I've ever seen. She never left her son's side. A hush fell heavy. Sam nodded at me. We rest our case. The judge leaned back, silent for a long moment. The air felt electrified, charged with something between relief and retribution. Finally, she spoke. I've heard enough. Her tone was sharp, precise, surgical. This petition is denied. Furthermore, this court finds evidence of coercion, perjury, and violation of medical privacy. I am ordering an investigation into the Carter family's conduct. Effective immediately, all petitioners are restrained from contacting Miss Lane or interfering with the Mason Lane Trust. Sloane shot to her feet. You can't. I can. Judge Cole snapped. And I will. My mother started to cry. Real tears this time. My father stared straight ahead, hollow-eyed. Sloane stood frozen, fury flickering behind her composure. As the gavel struck, reporters burst into a frenzy. Cameras flashed like lightning. I turned to Sam. It's over. He gave a faint smile. For them, yes. For you, it's just beginning. Outside, the sky had cleared. The air was sharp with winter sunlight, clean and new. Evelyn stood near the steps with Mason's grandparents, tears of pride glistening. When I reached them, Evelyn whispered, "He'd be proud, Harper." I looked toward the crowd of reporters. Microphones thrust forward. One asked, "Mrs. Lane, how do you feel about the verdict?" For the first time in months, I smiled calm, measured. Justice was done for my son. The cameras flashed again. But I didn't flinch. I turned and walked down the courthouse steps, sunlight catching the silver pendant at my throat. Each step felt lighter. Behind me, Sloane's perfect world was crumbling. Ahead, Mason's legacy was finally free. They tried to take everything: my sanity, my name, my child's memory. Instead, they'd handed me something far more powerful: the truth. And I wasn't done using it. The morning after the verdict, I woke before dawn. For the first time in months, the silence didn't crush me, it soothed. The house still smelled faintly of Evelyn's cinnamon tea from the night before, and sunlight filtered through the curtains in thin, golden slits. I walked into what used to be our war room. The binders still sat in neat rows: evidence, affidavits, photos. But the air was different now. Lighter. The table wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was the foundation of something new. Sam called just after 7. They filed nothing overnight, he said. The restraining order's active. The trust is secure. I exhaled. So it's really over? Legally. Yes, he replied. But Sloane's never been good at losing. Keep your eyes open. I hung up and stared out the window. Across the street, Evelyn was watering her roses in a faded blue robe, like nothing had changed. She caught my eye and raised a hand in a small wave. Later that day, I met with Sam again, not in the courtroom, but in his office. He slid a single folder across the desk. You asked what's next, he said. I think you already know. Inside was a proposal: the charter for the Mason Lane Foundation, a scholarship for pediatric hematology nurses, emergency housing grants for families, support for research into rare blood disorders. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. He wanted to help other kids, I whispered. Now he will. Sam smiled. You turned survival into purpose. That's something even your family can't touch. Outside his office, reporters lingered, hoping for another quote. One asked, "Are you seeking damages against your sister?" I paused, meeting his gaze. No, I said slowly. Justice was enough. The rest will handle itself. That night, I sat on the porch with Evelyn. The air smelled like rain and cut grass. We watched the last of the daylight fade. She poured tea into 2 chipped mugs. You think they'll stop? She asked. Maybe, I said. But people like Sloane don't disappear, they regroup. I reached into my pocket, pulling out my phone. There was one unread email. Subject line, anonymous tip. For your foundation. I opened it. A single line appeared. Check the Holt and Rowan charity filings. Something doesn't add up. I stared at the screen. A slow, cold smile forming. They thought they could bury the truth with my son. But they just handed me the shovel. Before you scroll away, tell me something: have you ever been the black sheep in your own family? The one everyone blames until the truth burns through their lies? If you have, then you know what I've learned. Blood isn't always loyalty, and silence can be the sharpest weapon. Hit like, Share this story and subscribe if you've ever had to stand alone just to stay free. Because my fight isn't over, not yet. And when the next secret surfaces from Sloane's perfect world, you'll want to be here to see what happens next.